All right, we've given people a few more minutes, so I think we're safe to get started. We have a decent crowd already in attendance, so thank you all for joining us this evening. Welcome to the neighborhood meeting, or the kickoff meeting for the Croft Street study area. You all have made it this far, so hopefully you have an idea of what's going on, but if not, we'll go through a brief presentation here to kind of give you more background on this process and what next steps will look like, and ultimately where we hope to go from here. So just getting started, this is what your screen should appear like. Right now it may be white, but you should be seeing my PowerPoint presentation. Forgive what's on there. My name is David Harding, not Valerie. Valerie is on, but not speaking at the moment. So yeah, my name is David Harding. I'm a traffic engineer here at the City of Greenville. I'm going to be managing the process with you guys going forward. You should see a screen over here where it has participation, Valerie's name, just a typical WebEx screen. So maybe you're familiar with this, maybe you're not. So you should, on the right-hand side, be able to see the participants and Q&A pane. This is where we're going to take your questions. If you have a microphone, you can utilize that at the end. Right now, everybody is muted, and we're going to remain that way for the rest of the presentation. Again, it's only 5 minutes or so long, so it'll be brief. If you have a question during the presentation, you can always type it into the Q&A box. Be sure to, I think there's an option to direct it towards the presenter or to everyone. Please direct it to everyone so that myself and Valerie and Celeste, who are also on, can all see it. That way we can track all the questions and make sure everybody gets their questions answered. You can always raise your hand, which is an option. I think here you go. I should be clicking forward. So here's outlining where the Q&A pane is, where you can input your questions. There's a raise hand button that should be adjacent to your name. So if you do have a question, you can just click on that, and that will let me know that you would like to speak, and I can unmute you one by one as we go through your questions. You can unmute yourself, I suppose, or I can handle that from my end, depending on your functionality. All right, so kicking things off. So the study area for Croft Street is identified on the attached. I believe this has already been depicted to some of the members, but if not, these are the members of your neighborhood that are going to have access to the traffic calming process. Traffic calming affects everybody in the neighborhood, but we give select access to those who are immediately affected by traffic calming efforts, not those who are passing through, but strictly the residents there. So the blue highlighted area is the area identified for Croft Street. The process, how we got here, somebody in the neighborhood has reached out to the City of Greenville, traffic engineering, requesting traffic calming, most likely a speed hump. We take that, provide an application, and a petition goes around the neighborhood, and 50% of the neighborhood residents must sign off on the petition in order to say, yes, we want to enter the traffic calming process. It doesn't have to be 100% or even close to that, but there has to be a good enough consensus that traffic calming is desired for the neighborhood. And that's where we are today. They'll have completed the petition, gotten in excess of the 50% required, and here we are making it to the kickoff meeting and discussing next steps. So those next steps, before we really start getting into any specifics on traffic calming measures, speed humps, things of that sort, we need to get some background information. And that information is conducted via the data collection we do is we count vehicles, traffic counts. And what that tells us is how many vehicles and speeds of the street because we have minimum requirements in order to implement traffic calming measures. So as we go through the data collection process, we'll review the data. If everything passes the warrants to have traffic calming, we go down the planning stage. Ultimately, the neighborhood, and we'll get into this in a little more detail in the next couple of slides, the neighborhood will propose some traffic calming measures that they would like to see implemented. That will go back to the neighborhood for a vote, and if the votes pass, then we proceed with installation. So we'll just expand upon those kind of high-level bullet points a little bit more. What data is collected? We collect the average speed, 85th percentile, and what that means is 85% of the cars, if 100 vehicles go by in a given day, 85% of those vehicles are traveling at this speed or less. That gives us a good indicator of, it's kind of a standard in the traffic engineering industry for speeds in an area. And also the average daily volume. Minimum, so as we enter the traffic calming process, speed is obviously probably why you all are here. People are speeding through the neighborhood. So that's why we're going to be looking at speed. But the daily volume is really necessary because we have certain limits to where we can install traffic calming devices. We have to have a minimum volume of 300 cars per day and a maximum volume of, I believe it's 2,000 vehicles per day. We have to be somewhere in that range. If we're under that threshold, we're not going to be able to justify installing speed humps. And if we're over that threshold, the street is kind of beyond that capacity for traffic calming efforts, so we can't go that route either. So that's the data that we're going to be looking to collect. And we do this, time of year is important. Your typical daily volume, it happens Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. That way people aren't on vacation, or Mondays and Fridays, things can be a little bit unusual. So we collect our data on the middle of the weeks, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, and during the school year. That's, if this is summertime, we won't collect counts. We do it when school's in session, not over Christmas break, just because that is when the typical traffic is experienced in an area. So once we move past the data, and if all those warrants are passed and we can move forward with the process, we're going to look at developing a plan. What is going to be put where, how many, that sort of thing. I will play a supportive role in that process. The neighborhood will take volunteers from the neighborhood to be part of the planning team. We'll just provide oversight and guidelines for, we have rules for where we can and cannot place things, so we're just going to help govern that process. But we don't live in the neighborhood, so we're going to lean on the residents to coordinate amongst yourselves and figure out what you want to put and where within our guidelines, and we'll work with you on that front. The public input website that you see below the Who Develops the Plan bullet, that's where you will be able to access and volunteer. That's where we're going to be putting some information such as these slides, this presentation. Don't worry about writing that down. That'll also be available later in the presentation, but this is where you will be able to go to volunteer to be on the study team for your neighborhood. What streets are eligible? Your neighborhood is easy. It's pretty well limited to Croft Street, so this isn't terribly difficult to figure out where we're going to take data, but as I mentioned earlier, in order to qualify for traffic calming measures, your street must have a minimum of 300 vehicles per day and fewer than 2,500 vehicles per day. There are some variables that we can play with if you're below that 300 vehicle per day threshold. If the speed exceeds, if the 85th percentile speed exceeds 10 miles per hour over the speed limit, that would qualify you as an exception to that rule. But generally speaking, we're going to initially start with the volume data to qualify as street. And the next up for the plan is what goes into it. When you typically hear traffic calming, you probably think of speed humps. Those are the most common. They're the most effective. There are some other guidelines out there that we can utilize to help calm traffic and slow them down. Pictured here is a landscape median. Reducing lane width inherently has a calming and slowing effect because you just have the driver has less pavement to work with. So there are some other means that can be evaluated, but ultimately it's going to come down to the neighborhood about what you want to see in your neighborhood and what you think will be effective. So getting more into the devices available, here are a number of items that are eligible in the traffic calming process. Moving from left to right, it starts with how easy it is to get installed. The left-hand column under neighborhood vote, in order to get those installed, all that has to be done is the neighborhood has to agree and vote upon them. As long as they fit within our engineering guidelines, those can be installed. As you move from left to right, it gets a little bit more difficult, a few more hoops to jump through to get them installed. The engineering approval, we have to look at just to make sure for a traffic circle or alternative parking measures, things of those kinds. We need to do additional engineering analyses to make sure that they are applicable for your situation. And if you wanted to go over into the council approval column, chicanes or landscape bump outs to allow you to kind of an S turn through an intersection to slow people down, that will actually have to go through council approval. But important to note is as you move to the right, you have to meet all the prerequisites first. So in order to get the chicanes or textured pavements under council approval, you would have to first pass the neighborhood vote, then you have to pass the engineering approval, and then it would go to city council for approval. So just keep that in mind. But here are a list of traffic calming measures that we can certainly discuss in more detail as we enter the process and collect some data and move forward from there. So just a few things that we want you to keep in mind, just frequent questions that come up. Speed humps, they can't just be placed arbitrarily on the street. We do have spacing requirements, i.e. 400 to 450 feet spacing in between speed humps. We also have some minimum spacing requirements from stop signs. You don't want to put a speed hump 50 feet from a stop sign. So that's not listed on here, but again, that's something that we will help you with as you move into the planning stage of it. Each speed hump installed will add approximately 8 seconds in response time for emergency vehicles. They obviously can't fly over the speed humps. That's what they're designed for. So just keep that in mind because it can affect response times of emergency services. Speed humps are required to be installed with signs saying that there's a hump at this location, warning drivers. So that oftentimes affects property owners because these will be installed in front of somebody's home. And while they may want the speed hump, they may not be so fond of the sign on the edge of their yard. So that will need to be kept in mind as well. Landscape islands, should they be desired for your neighborhood, they do require written property owner permission. When we install landscape islands, you're not allowed to park in that area where the landscape island is. So depending on your street, a lot of people may park on the road. And if you put a landscape median in, then parking will be restricted there. Therefore, if a residence has all their parking on the street, that would impact them. So we would require their signatures of approval if that is desired. Speed cushions do allow for free passage in emergency vehicles. They have spacing to allow wheels for larger vehicles to bypass the speed hump. while still affecting passenger vehicles. But the downside to those is while they do allow emergency vehicles to pass through unobstructed, they do not slow down larger vehicles, i.e. FedEx, UPS, Amazon, which unfortunately, based on their type of work, tend to be frequent flyers for speeding. So just keep that in mind as you move forward and discuss options for what the neighborhood may like to see. So once the study team has, so we're going to collect the data and share it with the study team. Once, if that passes, the study team is going to prepare a plan for what they think would work. And after some back and forth with our staff to make sure everything is acceptable, then it goes to a neighborhood vote. How the vote works is it is electronic. We do offer paper ballots for those that desire them, but each traffic calming measure is going to be voted on individually. So if, for example, your street has 3 speed humps proposed, each speed hump would have its own individual vote. 70% passing votes must be received in order for that speed or traffic calming measure to be implemented. So you might get 2 out of 3 speed humps passed. Those 2 would be installed. That third one that did not pass would not be installed. It's not an all or nothing approach. It is on a case-by-case basis. Who gets to vote is a very common question. So we do not keep up with and try to track down how many eligible people are in a household. We do leave that up to the honor system. But each individual in the household who is eligible to drive, 18 years old with a valid driver's license, can vote. So one household may have 1 vote, other households may have 4, 5, 6 votes, whatever that is. We're not going to track down and verify that information. We trust everybody is going to abide by the honor system, and each individual 18 years and older with a valid driver's license can vote on the traffic calming process. Should everything proceed and traffic calming measures are passed by the neighborhood, we'll move on to getting them scheduled for installation. We do traffic calming across the city, so we do have a little bit of a backlog that we need to schedule around. There may be some budget constraints. We have an annual traffic calming budget that we have to work within. Croft Street would not break the budget, but we would just need to be mindful of everything else going on. And then, of course, delivery schedule of materials, as very common this day and age, could just delay things a little bit based on manufacturer's backlog. How long does the installation take? That varies based on the measure that the neighborhood wishes to install. The picture here is one of the very common rubber speed hump systems that you've probably seen throughout the city. These take a little bit longer. They're about a week start to finish per device to get installed. But it varies based on a variety of conditions, including weather. But just some knowledge for how long things should take should it get to that point. So that's the end of the presentation. Again, this is the website, the publicinput.com/Croft Street website to access the traffic calming process for your neighborhood. This is where we will allow people to sign up to be on the study team. One thing I would note about the study team, it's not intended to be a select few making the decision for the entire neighborhood. It is intended to be the go-between between traffic engineering and the neighborhood. We can't coordinate with every individual resident, so we leave it up to some volunteers to be the representatives for the neighborhood. So please keep that in mind. It's supposed to be a collaborative effort, but that's what we found to be the most beneficial in streamlining the process. Again, my name is David Harding, engineer here in traffic engineering. This is my email and phone number. Feel free to reach out to us in the future as you have any questions, and we will get that to you. The public input website, we are going to be posting this presentation up. So if you have any questions after the fact that you think of and wish you could see a slide again, you will be able to do that. Anybody who was not able to attend tonight is more than welcome to log in there and pull down the presentation, and they can watch anything that we discussed tonight. So with that, I'm going to wrap up the presentation piece of it, and we can open it up to Q&A and go from there. So let's see here. We have no hands are raised. Oh, I stand corrected. Let me see if I can figure out how to unmute. I'm afraid I might mispronounce your name.
It's Michael.
McKay?
It's Michael. It's Michael, and I fat fingered it. Sorry about that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Takes the pressure.
I was making dinner while we did that. So just a question about the 70% threshold. Is that 70% of? You said you don't have a way to track eligible voters, but are we looking at 70% of those who voted, or 70% of some threshold of people who live in the neighborhood? If it comes to a vote.
70% of those that voted.
Okay.
Because we don't have a way of knowing how many people are eligible in an area, it would be a very difficult task to say it has to meet 70% of that number. So sure. If 30 people vote for your area, then it would be 70% of 30, whatever that would come out.
Perfect. About 21.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome. And Sam?
I had a question about speed limits. So presently we're unposted, and what I was told is if you're unposted, that's a de facto 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. Irrespective of the calming process, is there a process by which we could get the street, I guess, rescheduled or whatever to have a posted 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, because 35 seems excessive in a residential area like ours?
So that would not be through the traffic calming process. You would need to talk to me about that. I'm going to make a note of that, and we will discuss that. We will discuss looking into that, see what measures we can do to look at whether or not we can post a speed limit less than or equal to that.
Okay.
We have to abide by a specific process. We can't just arbitrarily make a speed limit happen. We would have to look at a process to do that. But it would be nothing similar to the traffic calming process. It would just be an engineering evaluation.
Okay. And so that's a thing that we could petition for and have done separately, or that y'all could just do of your own accord?
Yeah, it wouldn't be a petition. Again, it's nothing of the level that we're doing now with the traffic calming process. That would just be something that we here at Traffic Engineering would take a look at separately. So that's something I'm going to make a note of, and we will look at that internally.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Good question. Is that it for the questions? Have I seen any in? Oh, sorry, Spencer. Oops. Spencer. It keeps moving around on me.
Thanks for this presentation. I'm just curious what the timeline is for all of it. You know, to install the daily traffic count, and then would that be then after the traffic count, the speed check to see if X amount of cars are speeding along this road? Just
so that no, that's a
good
question.
What kind of timeline are you talking about before anything could be implemented?
That should be here within the next few weeks. We won't broadcast that time about when we're going to do it, because we have seen where people figure out when we're doing it and try to skew the tests or skew the data by running over repeatedly and speeding. Yes, we do have some of those people. So we're not going to broadcast and tell you when that will be, but it should be in a reasonably short period of time. Sometime in the next few weeks, we'll have somebody out there. And the devices we use are very incognito. They're just little magnetic devices that are adhered to the pavement, so they blend in pretty well with it. But it's not somebody out there with a radar gun taking speeds or anything of that sort that would alert motorists to something is being done there.
So conceivably, if they came back and you see what we see every day, which is people speeding down the road, there could be traffic calming mechanisms put into place. What, within a month, within 2 months? Would it take upwards of 6 months? I guess I'm trying to get a better idea of timeline.
So again, when we get the data, we'll share that data with you. And assuming everything checks out and that the warrants are met, then it goes back to the study committee to propose what kind of plans they want to implement. That timeline can vary wildly based on the study team and how driven they are to get this happen. That process could take a couple weeks. That process could take months or even in excess of that. We've seen it all. So that one is going to be up to you and the other study team members. Once the plan gets proposed, approved by engineering, to scheduled for installation, that varies a little bit based on the backlog. Valerie, you may know better than I do, but we're probably 4 or 5 months out on scheduling.
We have approximately 16 speed humps in advance of this area. The installation is handled by our Public Works Streets Department, and they're probably looking at about a 6-month backlog at the time.
Yikes. Okay. Thank you for that info.
Thank you for the question. So we're going to go with Dominic. There you go.
Had serious technical problems for this entire session, and I only caught a tiny fraction of what you said. So I feel like I really shouldn't be too involved in comments right now or questions because I missed so much.
No, I mean, if you have, I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. Hopefully it wasn't on my end and everybody else could hear it okay. But no, if you have a question, again, now's an open forum. One thing I will say is the whole presentation will be posted online at this website, which hopefully you can see on your screen, thepublicinput.com/Croft Street.
Okay.
So you will be able to look at this entire presentation, all the PowerPoint slides, everything will be available to you online.
Okay.
Should you want to go back and look at it. But if you do have a question, you're more than welcome to ask it in this forum.
Okay. Just by way of introduction, I have been academically and professionally involved in traffic calming and transportation and town planning for 40 years. And so I know a thing or two about this issue. I frankly have serious concerns about speed humps. I think that speed humps have several significant problems, and I've known that for decades. I'm really concerned about the fact that they're very popular and they tend to be installed quite a bit. And I noticed in Greenville, there have been a lot installed. And I know in most cities, the reason that speed humps are emphasized so much or used so much is because they're very low cost and they're a quick way for elected officials to have neighbors feel like something's been done to slow down cars. I am an enormous advocate for slowing cars and designing streets to slow cars. I'm a strong advocate for traffic calming. But again, I have serious concerns about speed humps and any form of vertical intervention I strongly support horizontal intervention like bulb outs, landscape bulb outs, raised medians. I'm a big advocate of that. I like the idea of pinching down the width of streets to slow down cars. I think there are a lot of benefits to doing that. To have horizontal intervention, the vertical intervention, big problems with speed humps and other verticals is that they cause noise pollution for neighborhoods. They're a real serious problem for emergency vehicle response. They cause some problems for bicycling, and they're not very attractive. They also cause problems even for motorists that are driving at fairly slow speeds, which is a problem in and of itself. I mean, if a motorist is driving really slowly, they shouldn't be bothered by the device, and yet they would be with humps, because humps are pretty annoying at almost any speed. So I'm really concerned that we're going to end up going with speed humps because that's just a common application for traffic calming, and I have big concerns about that.
Well, this would be a great point in time for me to advocate for you to get on the study team. Again, you bring up some valid points. This is something that we leave up to the residents of the area to select what they want in their neighborhood, since they're going to be driving on or around it every day. All the items that you listed are available in the traffic calming process. This has to be agreed upon and ultimately voted in by the neighborhood. So
I think my concern is that the citizens don't really have a good idea of what's effective and what the options are. And I think that if people were really aware of some of the effective horizontal intervention tools, I think that they would be much more supportive, because they do have a lot of benefits. I mean, they also, in addition to slowing down cars effectively and not being a problem for emergency vehicles, they also add aesthetic element. They beautify the street when they're done well. Personally, I believe that an ideal for traffic calming would be horizontal intervention or pinching down the width of the street with on-street parking. And when the on-street parking is not there, which is common in some streets because you don't have enough on-street parking throughout the day, I think there the tactic is that you would use landscape bulb outs or on-street parking pockets, where even without
all of this is available in the traffic calming process. So
Okay.
I'm not refuting anything you're saying.
Okay, great.
But
Great.
the sales pitch you're doing is really for you and the study team to decide. Again,
Okay.
sorry to cut you off there, but
Right, understandable.
all is valid that you're saying, but really that's the neighborhood study team discussion. That's where that should really take place, and ultimately selecting what you and your neighbors want to see in the area.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Okay. Did you have any other, or was that the primary? Going back to Andrew.
Thank you. I had some technical issues too, but thank you for getting us this far. I just had a question about the study team, how you select that and get on it, and how we meet, whether it's virtual or in person.
So to sign up for the study team, that is strictly, strictly a volunteer team. So the website that you see in front of you, the publicinput.com/Croft Street, you can go to that website and sign up to be on the study team. What y'all do beyond there, whether that's structured, informal, that is entirely on you. That is not a city-driven process. That is entirely up to the individuals that have volunteered to be on the team. So y'all can collaborate amongst yourselves however best y'all see fit, and whatever works best for you and the other team members.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Sam.
Yeah. Sorry to comment again.
No.
I had a secondary question I thought about once I got off. So in addition, issues with regards to speed, we also, I think, have issues with regards to vehicles disregarding stop signs. And a lot of times I mean, personally, I've observed them, do rolling and or just treat a stop sign like a yield sign when they're turning right. Are there specific calming measures or solutions that are proposed by the city to address similar issues? And
Um, so really all that can be done at that point in time is you can engage the police department and to try to get that enforced. One of the things that, in fact, the next slide here, a question that we typically get, we haven't gotten it yet, and this one is, why are stop signs not considered part of traffic calming? When stop signs are not warranted per a federal or a manual that we have to abide by, when they are not warranted, drivers figure that out and tend to ignore them. So in this application, there's not much that we in traffic engineering can do to enforce that. That would be more of a police enforcement issue, is getting in touch with them, and maybe they can have an officer swing by through the area, unfortunately.
Okay, so they're not like specific engineering strategies that address that. Like for instance, I thought maybe if you did islands at intersections, does that help by virtue of disincentivizing or discouraging cars to real quickly, round a corner? I mean, I didn't know if y'all had guidelines or recommendations or anything like that.
That's not something we look at through this process. As with most streets in the city, they tend to be quite old. So your problem is not unheard of. But in going through and modifying the curbs to narrow it up, while that would help vehicles speeding through, it wouldn't necessarily force a stop. If you restricted sight lines or something, that might, but that's a danger in of itself. So through this process, we don't really have a mechanism to deal with that specific item that you bring up.
Okay. Thank you.
Dominic?
I will say I agree with Sam. I think that traffic circles would be a desirable intervention for slowing cars making turns and making them be more attentive when they come through intersections. So I agree that I think that a physical change like that with a traffic circle would be something that I'd love to be able to have us consider. But I understand from what you just said that maybe is not an option that we can consider.
I haven't seen that process go through for an existing stop condition, whether or not that can be converted to a circle. Valerie, have you seen that in this process? Or would the traffic circle only be involved for an unsignalized intersection?
Well, traffic circles now are very difficult to install based on the criteria that we have to use in designing it. We do have options. You can have mountable mini roundabouts. That's not part of traffic calming, though. Traffic circles, the way they were instituted early in the process, they're basically a round raised median in the center of the intersection. The criteria that we have to use now is basically a vehicle such as a fire engine or a sanitation truck has to be able to circumnavigate the traffic circle by 270 degrees or 3/4 of the way around a circle. And a lot of the intersections now are just simply not large enough to accommodate that. And so we don't see that as often. I also wanted to mention in the concern about the speed humps and the vertical deflection and that sort of thing. There, as David mentioned, there are other options that are available in the traffic calming menu, if you will. However, the landscaped islands and the speed humps are the least expensive options available. Anything more than that, if we look at bump outs at intersections and things like that, the cost tends to go up. And if they exceed a certain dollar value, then it becomes a capital project that has to be approved by council. So that's just something, that's another reason why speed humps and the landscaped islands are so popular, is because it does not take that level of approval to get them installed. And so it's just, I hear you, we put in bump outs. If you've driven McDaniel Avenue, they have them in certain sections of that, but that was a capital project that had to have funding dedicated to it. So I just wanted to make that point.
Right. I'm fully aware of it. I appreciate your comment about how the emergency vehicles, larger emergency vehicles, need to have ability to come through intersections with any kind of circle or anything installed at the intersection. I do believe, though, that we can install some circles that are mountable, with mountable curbs, and that would allow them to come through better. I guess that's more along the lines of what I was thinking, that you have a mountable circle. But anyway, my actual comment or question was, would the study group have the ability to be given say a list of examples of various traffic calming features that we can go have a look at and see with our own eyes?
Well, if you look on the screen now, that's basically the device menu that you can select from. And if you Google any of those under traffic calming, you can get various examples of what they look like.
Okay. All right.
We don't have an itemized list that we could say for lateral shifts, go to these locations and so on and so forth. That we don't have that ability. So the Googling of it would be the best option to get a visualization for each of these measures.
You mean Googling actual locations in Greenville?
No, just Googling traffic islands, traffic calming will give you pictures, not specific to the Greenville area.
Okay, so
for those that aren't familiar with these measures and what they visually look like, that would be the best opportunity, unless you can give background insight to the other members. That would be the best opportunity to get an understanding of what these items might look like in this scenario.
Okay, it'd be great if we could get like representative photos of the examples here in Greenville, so that we could look at example photos that have been already done in Greenville.
Well, that's what I was saying, is we don't have that categorized to do that. That's not something we can just easily get and pass along to you.
Okay. All right.
All good questions and conversation. I don't see any more hand raised. Anybody have any last questions? Again, I strongly encourage everyone who's willing and able to go to the public input website, which I'll put up on the screen again here. This is where you can to register to be on the study team. That's by far the best way to get your voice heard and have input. There you go. To have input into what happens moving forward with your neighborhood. So seeing no other questions, I can adjourn the meeting. So thank you everybody for jumping on with us tonight and the dialogue, and looking forward to moving on to next steps. Thank you.